Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Looks quite peculiar now, trying this with an iPad, and let's see how it works out, inshallah. So first things first, something new, trying the iPad out, see how the iPad works. Look a little bit small, but that's probably because I am. Or maybe I need to try the landscape version the next time. So first things first, we're always going to do is this, we need a name for our series. So we had a number of suggestions, that I put up there, which was, what were they, let me see. Here we are. So it was either D3. Now if you remember, during Ramadan we had our daily da'wah dose. This is where the triple D comes from, and this was short 3-4 minutes discussion that we had on a particular topic, on a particular point. And then we would have the W3, which stood for the weekly awakening wa'adh, which would take place on surprisingly on a weekly basis, and they would last for a little bit longer, maybe several minutes or so. And so we were sort of thinking another name, because we had some interested parties, some people who felt that this the daily da'wah dose should carry on. Obviously not on a daily basis, because it's a little bit more difficult, more teaching responsibilities outside of Ramadan. So maybe on a weekly basis. But it wasn't a awakening wa'adh, it was more a da'wah dose, so that became a D3, which didn't really work, and neither did WD40 really work. So we're going to come up with a name, and just earlier, previous to this, I got a message from someone, and a Dr. WK, who suggested that maybe the name should be a little bit more to the point, and he gave me a few suggestions. So based on that, I think I've got a name for it, and the name we're going to go for is So You Want to Be a JT, which is Jannati, because I originally thought of So You Want to Be a J. The only problem is J is also used for Jahannam, so that would be a bit unfortunate to want to be somebody who's going to Jahannam. So therefore the J part is fine, but we needed to add something to it, so that's why I've gone for So You Want to Be a JT, which obviously, So You Want to Be a Jannati, we've got a little bit of rhyme thing going on, and it can maybe tackle the other problem that we have, and the other problem being, which is that some of the lectures that I've given are very technical, and obviously some of the people have sort of said to me that the language is quite dense, language is quite deep and can be a bit complicated. So couldn't I make some of my lectures to be a little bit more kind of street level, can be a little bit more kind of where people can hook up and link to it and connect with it a little bit better. So that's another thing that these next sort of batch of recordings will be, or live streaming will be, which is to touch upon this whole thing of connecting with the kind of I don't know the right word to look for it, but to connect with the Joe public, connect with the average person on the street, rather than make it specific for an academic audience or somebody who's read up on that particular topic. So that's also another reason why the name is going to be So You Want to Be a JT, and we can use a little bit of street slang and language where we can, in order to get our message across. So that's really the intro to the backdrop of the whole series, and the aim is obviously that we'll try to run that every Sunday, preferably. There will be times obviously where unfortunately we won't be able to run it because of schedules and travelling and things like that. So I will then try to have a substitute time, but if for whatever reason we miss it, then we can always pick one up the week after, inshallah. So that's the background. Let's now get into it. So first thing what I'll do today, anyway, is just share a little story with you that I shared with some students. And it's regarding a chap who hears about this incredible phenomenon, and the incredible phenomenon is that there's some elephants, huge elephants, and these huge elephants, I'm trying to follow the sort of live stream as well, see if any questions or something coming up, because there's something appearing on the large screen here, but nothing appearing on the screen down here. But anyway, I'll keep an eye on that, see if anything else comes up on there. And so he heard about these exceptionally large elephants, and when he heard about these exceptionally large elephants, he wanted to find out, and the phenomenon that he heard, or the really interesting thing that he heard about them, was that they didn't run away, then they weren't caged or anything, or they weren't held securely or anything. They weren't in some iron reinforced sort of cages, and yet they didn't run off. So he was quite surprised about this, that these elephants, why they chose not to run off. So what he did is he sets off on his way, finds a place where they are, and when he gets there, he finds these elephants, and these elephants are there, and they are huge, these elephants. And for those of us from the UK, they'll be able to understand this a little bit better, but they're the size of double-decker buses. So these are huge elephants. But what's strange and what's quite peculiar, which he picks up straight away, is that none of these elephants are actually in any cages. They're not in any cages, they're not being held by any sticks or anything, or not chained down in place. He's quite surprised that people are walking in amongst them, people who come to see these elephants, and these elephants aren't moving at all. So what he decides to do then is he decides to take a closer look at these elephants. So he starts to make his way and take a close look at the elephants, and when he gets a little bit closer, he notices that on one of the legs of the elephants there's a rope, and this rope is tied from the elephant leg towards a chain in the ground, and it's tied to that. But he notices that this rope is not very strong. The rope itself looks fairly flimsy, but even if the rope is not very flimsy, it's easy for the elephant to tug on it, and not even tug on it, even if it accidentally sneezed or something, the rope would come aside and it would be able to separate from the chain, or even if it wanted to, it could potentially rip the chain out from the ground. So he was quite surprised at why these elephants had not moved away from these ropes and stayed with these ropes. So he asks somebody who looks like they work at this place, and he says, look, I want to find out who looks after these elephants, because I've got a couple of questions. So the chap who had seen him at that time says to him, look, see, if you go across there, he points this chap out, and he says, go ask him. If you go ask him, he'll be able to tell you why these elephants don't run away, because he was very curious about it, he was very surprised about this. So off he does, he toddles off, walks over to this guy, and he says, look, I've just got a few questions for you. You're the one who looks after the elephants. And the chap says, yes, I am. So he goes, right, well, why is it that these elephants, so huge, so strong, so powerful, why don't they pull themselves away from the rope itself and just run off? Why are they just stood there? So the call him elephant keeper for now. He smiles, and when he smiles, he says to the person, he says, you're not the first person who's asked me this question. I've been asked this question several times by many people, and allow me to explain. And obviously the elephant keeper, the elephant trainer, took great pleasure out of this and people showing interest to him, and as a result he decides to sit down and explain to them why it is that these elephants don't disappear. I guess a few people speak to him, so he quite enjoyed the attention. So he says, what happened is these elephants were born here, and when these elephants were born here, they are separated from their mothers very early on, and what we do is we tie them to the rope that you find themselves with, tied to the chain, and at that time obviously the elephant's very small and the rope is quite secure, the chain is quite secure, so it doesn't allow the elephant to run off, and the elephant tugs and it pulls and it tries to run off, but it can't run off because obviously the rope is holding the elephant down. So after a while the elephant gets used to the idea. After a few months like this, it realizes that look, it can't get away from this rope, and it accepts it. It realizes that this rope is of a certain length and it can only allow it to go around a certain sort of circumference, basically a certain area, a circular area that it can travel, basically because the rope then becomes the radius and doesn't allow the elephant to go beyond that point. And so it gets used to it, gets trained. And then as the elephant starts to grow, even though the rope now is becoming not really capable of holding the elephant psychologically has now accepted that it can't go any further than this, and that's as far as it can go. So, and this carries on for some time until the elephant gets bigger and bigger and bigger, until obviously the elephant is huge, and this rope is basically like a string. But because it's been psychologically trained from a young age, the elephant won't pull away from this rope. So, and that's why you find that the elephant stays where it is. So the person then who had been asking these questions was quite astounded at the fact of this training which is provided to an animal at a young age, how it can impact on that creature as it grows up, and how the upbringing of the elephant had such a great impact on the elephant's life, even when the elephant became a huge beast. Now usually this story or stories to this effect or pictures to this effect, sometimes you'll see a huge horse tied to a twig, or you'll see a horse tied to a plastic chair or something, or an elephant tied to something like that, and it makes a person think that that we are psychologically restricted and we are not physically restricted. So many of the restrictions we find in life are not physical. They are not actually stopping us, they're not restricting us, but really what they are physical restraints, really psychological restraints, and it's our psychology which stops us from moving forward. So these are normally portrayed as something negative, that overcome your psychological blocks, overcome your psychological sort of issues which is tying you down, and break free from your psychological traps. However, that's not always the only way that this can be understood. This can be understood quite easily in a different way, and that different way is that we have an upbringing. And that upbringing that we have allows us to restrain and restrict ourselves in a certain way. So this is what we call tarbiyah. So this tarbiyah, what it does is it retains and restricts us in a certain way. So we know that certain things are wrong and certain things are right. So as we then become grown adults, even though we can go do those things, before we couldn't do them because our parents would stop us. So if we wanted to steal a biscuit from the kitchen, we'd get caught and we'd be told off, and obviously some punishment would be given to us. But when we become grown adults, then because we think there's less chance of somebody catching us, because obviously the house is a finite space, a small area, and outside of the house is quite big, so people can get away with committing crime and not necessarily get caught for it. So in that regard, what it does is this is what we call tarbiyah. So if we can bring the tarbiyah in our children when they're young, then as they become older, even though those restrictions are no longer there, so a father might now be a 60-year-old, and he may physically be weaker than his son, but because psychologically the father's always played this sort of person in charge, the one who decides what can and can't be done, the one who gives those kind of instructions and orders, then even when the son is now stronger, smarter, bigger than his father, he will still psychologically have that same respect to his father that he did when he was a young child, because it's something which is now ingrained in him. It's something which is within his psychology, like we saw with the elephant and the rope. Even though the rope itself had no means of restricting the elephant's movement, it psychologically had accepted that it couldn't move because this rope was there. In the same way, even then when our parents become, when the parent becomes weaker, the parent becomes arguably dependent upon the son, because the son has been raised in a certain way, then psychologically he'll always continue to respect his father. And in the same way, respect religion, respect his mother. So tarbiyah is the essence here. So let's not always necessarily look at this thing in a negative way, that we find that these psychological restraints, if we can call them that, stop us from doing great things, and we can achieve greatness if we were to remove these psychological restraints. Many times, rather than considering them to be psychological restraints, we should consider them to be also tarbiyah, which has been inculcated in us as we were young children, which then means even when we become adults, we continue to have that kind of, let's use the term psychological constraints from doing what is wrong, rather than saying, oh well, if one doesn't have that, then they have no restrictions. They can continue to behave and act in a manner which they see fit. So that's our little, what do you say we call it? So you want to be a JT. So let's call it that. So you want to be a JT. And over the weeks and months, as I get a little bit more adept at using this device, and obviously you can then sort of post questions on here. At the moment there's no questions which have come up, or I've missed them if they have come up, because I'm delivering straight this from our Twitter feed, which is at Mufti A. Muhammad, and so you can post your questions on there, tweet them directly there, and any topics that you wish me to cover over the following weeks as well. Otherwise, I'll discuss a pertinent point, something maybe going on during the week, something which has been of an issue, something which has been brought to my attention, inshallah, and we'll sort of keep it for this length of time, maybe about sort of 10-15 minutes or so. I go over sometimes to 20 minutes, but at least we'll cover that kind of material. So I hope you enjoy our new series and continue to listen and forward. Very important that we engage other people in this as well and spread them around, inshallah. They will be going up on our YouTube channel, which is the Olive Foundation, and they will also be going up on our Telegram channel, which is also surprisingly the Olive Foundation. So you'll find the links there, join them so you can forward them, inshallah. And as I said, over the week, and even whilst we're going live, you can raise your questions. You can also raise any particular topics that you'd like me to discuss. So I hope to see you again, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.